Hi, hello. While part 2 of the Undeniably Canon FNaF timeline is still in production, I want to tide y'all over with some behind the scenes for part 1. If you're not already aware, this series is a full remake of a video I made in 2021 called An Objective and True FNaF Timeline. If you're confused, the titles are intentionally impossible claims. The original video was actually made for my digital media class in high school, as I wanted to make an ambitious project making use of different ways to visualize the script. Alongside that, I thought it'd be fun to make a FNaF timeline that almost sounds convincing, but had glaringly obvious plot points that were completely made up, while the narration plays everything straight. I'm still very proud of that video, but I knew I could do better with that idea. My goal for this version of the timeline is to make a fully cohesive comedic take on the FNaF storyline that takes more advantage of the absurdity of that first half of my original video. My biggest problem with the original is that after about halfway in, it becomes more of just a summary of the actual events with some sarcastic remarks sprinkled in. Once part 2 is out, hopefully I succeed in fixing that. Alongside my gripes with certain aspects of the original timeline, of course, is that at the end of last year, Security Breach came out. I had already planned to make a follow-up covering it, so my immediate idea was to make an objective and true summary of Security Breach. Obviously, that wound up expanding exponentially. I decided to do a full remake from the ground up, so I could utilize some missed opportunities and weave things together more with the new material I got to work with. With that in mind, I set forth to craft my magnum opus. And it only took half a year to actually make the first part. I wrote the initial script for the video in January 2022, but barely made a dent of progress for several months. I was not in a good headspace with this project, and just about every aspect of it suffered because of it. The art I had made for it was a significant downgrade from the original, the narration was worse, and despite having all the time in the world to work on it, I couldn't ever bring myself to. But I did make sure to preserve that version. So if you're curious what the video was like before production was completely overhauled, here you go. The year was 1983, January to be exact. Local nobodies Henry, Emily, and William Afton were walking down the streets of Hurricane, Utah, when suddenly they noticed that not once in their life have they ever caught a glimpse of a yellow grizzly bear. It was then their fates were sealed, and they knew that they must fulfill their destiny. Henry and William were something of robotics enthusiasts, so they finally used their untapped potential to create the most realistic animatronic bear imaginable. On their first attempt, they made a decrepit, muddy yellow bear with giant teeth and claws. This wasn't realistic. William, however, remembered that in the trunk of his car rested a cluster of discs that could emit audio frequencies that would fool people into seeing real bears. They slapped those bad boys on this animatronic, and suddenly it took the form of a beautiful golden grizzly, who they then named Ferdinand Von Bernard. Not only did he look the part and have a voice like honey butter, but the mind-altering audio accidentally gave him sentience and cosmic power beyond our human understanding. This was very dangerous. But the partners in furry shenanigans were not swayed. That is, until the entire town evacuated at the sight of this golden beast. Turns out, people are scared of loose bears. Who would have thunk it? Of course, this fear wasn't for nothing. Ferdinand was caught dining on a local restaurant owner, and he fled from the crime scene before law enforcement could get to him. William and Henry realized they had been a slight bit overzealous with their first creation. Good thing is, literally nobody knew or cared who they were, so they got away with this scot-free. Later that month, they designed an animatronic simply based on Ferdinand's likeness. This character was quite a downgrade, being both simpler and stupider. This didn't matter to the duo, though, as they loved their creation. And with that, Fredbear was born. At first they had nowhere to actually put him, so they opted for the dump. He was truly a diamond in the rough. Amazingly, this attempt at entertainment was amusing enough to the citizens of Hurricane that they gave William and Henry $10, and it was enough to afford a recently vacated diner space. Fredbear was going to be a star. As you can see, yeah, that's a fraction of what was supposed to exist. It wasn't until I met Hydated in June 2022 that things completely changed. He had made some artwork inspired by the style of An Objective and True FNaF timeline, and I was so taken aback by how good it was, I immediately asked him if he would be willing to help me with the project. After that point, production completely changed and our creative juices were flowing perfectly together. While Hydatid worked on most of the visuals, I was able to edit the video and animate what he sent me basically every day for all of June and July. As things went along, I decided we had such a good grasp on production that I could extend the script from where it originally ended off. It was supposed to end after FNAF 2's section originally, but I realized that was an unsatisfying cliffhanger. So, I wrote everything up to FNAF 3's Springtrap origin to properly tie everything in Part 1 together. Now that it's out, I can confidently say that I made the right call. I'm extremely happy with how it came out, and the positive reception has been absolutely incredible. Thank you. Back to production, there was a very notable shift in style from the Objective and True timeline. As I previously stated, my goal in that was to try and use different visuals throughout to keep things interesting for the project. Initially, the Undeniably Canon timeline was going to retain the same type of visuals. The minigame style, the cartoony artwork, and direct FNAF gameplay was going to be maintained. However, once I had Hydatid on board, I decided to centralize it to just the minigame style to keep things consistent. Ultimately, I think this was the best call to make. There were a few instances where I still used actual FNAF gameplay, but it was significantly cut down from what I planned at first. Going forward, there's not going to be any of that. It'll be purely original visuals. I think the series is much better off that way. As for how the visuals came together, Hydatid and I storyboarded most, if not every scene for the video. Planning it out helped to make things much easier. Clear communication was very important, obviously, but it was pretty easy to do. We were very much in sync the entire time, and bouncing ideas off of each other helped make a lot of scenes and jokes much better than they could have been otherwise. For example, the scene where Popgoes the Weasel gets arrested had 3 different ideas in mind. When I drew the initial storyboard, I didn't really have any ideas for a specific character to be arrested, so I just imagined a random guy in a monkey suit. When Hydatid made the final version though, he wound up making 2 alternate scenes. One was Chuck E. Cheese, and the other was Popgoes. After like maybe 10 minutes of deliberation, we decided Popgoes was funnier. Given the reception to that gag, we made the right choice. One issue we had at first, mostly at the beginning of production, was consistent set pieces and character continuity. For example, a version of Trevor the Cashier's conga line had the missing children participating before we remembered the 2-year difference. So they were replaced with Michael's Uno buddies. I don't think anyone would have noticed or cared, but I think it was good that we caught that. Another continuity problem we had at first was the classic animatronics and the 1985 animatronics. Hydatid had drawn the scene of Henry and William looking at the animatronics, but they were of their FNAF 1 counterparts. We didn't want to scrap the drawing, so we just repurposed it for the FNAF 1 section, and then edited it to have the proper 1985 designs for the intended scene as well. Oh, he also had a habit of accidentally making William purple in the scenes before Cassidy kicks the pink out of him. Moving on, some of the running gags in this video tended to start from me just wanting to explain some oddly specific thing. The most notable of this was William's hatred of Foxy. That entire gag started just because I wanted to make fun of Funtime Foxy for being the lamest of that set of characters. So I wound up just deciding that William really hated the normal Foxy and wanted to make him so unappealing nobody would care about him. Then came figuring out why he hated Foxy, so I decided that Foxy was just a ratings trap in the Fredbear and Friends cartoon. There's probably some more detail I'm forgetting at the moment, but that's the gist of it. My favorite running gag, though, is Trevor the Cashier's conga line. That entire idea stemmed just from Shadow Freddy making the animatronics follow him in FNAF 3, so I just made it a core trait of his character that he liked doing that and set it up near the beginning so people could have a funny payoff at the end. Speaking of the shadows, them being the Springlock victims mentioned in FNAF 3 is a pretty old theory that I'm pretty sure most agree isn't actually true nowadays. I always liked it though, so I thought it'd be fun to make that the case in this timeline, and make them random employees with funny names. Though if your name is Harold or Trevor, I'm sorry. Eleanor Schmidt is also a character that just kinda popped out of nowhere. In the Objective and True FNAF timeline, she was present in the background for 2 shots because I wanted to poke fun at Mrs. Afton having no presence in the actual FNAF canon. However, now that Security Breach is out, there's a little table of staff bots that's probably meant to resemble the Afton family, and the one used to represent Mrs. Afton looks, well, yeah. Whether or not this is supposed to confirm Mrs. Afton being Ballora in the actual story isn't really clear, and it's not a very solid theory to begin with, but I decided this was good enough to justify making her Ballora in my timeline. Mostly because I thought she'd be a really funny character. Not to spoil part 2 or anything, but she's probably my favorite character in it. As for coming up with her name though, making her last name Schmidt was a pretty easy way to justify Michael's name being Mike Schmidt in FNAF 1. As for her first name, I just decided to name her Eleanor to mess with fans of the Fazbear Frights books. Or maybe it's deep lore. Who could say, really? Speaking of Fazbear Frights, Andrew's here. He's Golden Freddy in those books, and there's an actual theory that the stories and epilogues with him in it are canon to the games. I'm not too familiar with the books as I haven't read all of them myself, but that theory explains some weird things like Midnight Motorist, I'll get back to that later, and the idea of a random 7th child being thrown into the mix well after FNAF 6 is funny and believable enough to me that I wanted to throw him in there like he's just common knowledge. Not to mention that the bite victim refused to let me make him part of Golden Freddy. He said he has better things to do. I don't want to say too much about him, but if you're familiar with the original timeline I made, you'll know I robbed him of a name. The joke in the original was just having 2 plot-relevant kids named Cassidy, because I remember a debate going on about whether Cassidy was his name or the 5th victim of the missing children's incident. That joke never really landed though, because by the time the video actually came out, people had moved past that and started calling him Evan, and then I introduced the other Cassidy so late into it that anyone that would have been mad about that had stopped watching by that point. So I wanted to fix that problem this time. So I named him Nothing, as it should stay. Cassidy I also wanted to give some more focus, but be patient, it's not her time yet. I did actually give her a proper introduction this time though, which is already a significant improvement. And of course, she got the honor of being the reason for William going from pink to purple, which is just based on a weird sprite inconsistency in FNAF 2. Now, back to Midnight Motorist. The general consensus for that minigame is that the yellow guy in it is supposed to be William. I went with this approach for the objective and true timeline and just explained it as William in a yellow raincoat. However, going back to Andrew, there's a theory that the minigame is actually about him disappearing with an animatronic, and the yellow guy is his father. So I just used this as an excuse to reference the Silver Eyes and made that guy's name Dave Miller so William could use it as an alias later. A lot of people thought this was a Day Shift at Freddy's reference. It was not. The name Dave came from the novels first. Alongside this, I got to answer the question of the footprints in that minigame. It was Trevor the cashier all along. Oh, and I have 3 snippets of audio from when I recorded the script. I don't usually laugh at the gags by the time I record since I'm already desensitized to them, but I did break at 3 different parts. Here you go. Leopold was their immediate decision for the new mascot, as he was actually a bear. He wasn't golden, but he wasn't golden, but he would do. Turns out Toy Freddy was already retiring, as he really wanted to become a gamer. His endeavors Unfortunately, Fredbear was publicly executed 2 years prior. So, William and Henry did the unthinkable. I forgot how stupid that is. So, William and Henry did the unthinkable. The last thing I'll talk about is everyone's favorite golden grizzly bear, Ferdinand Von Bernard. Or second favorite, if you prefer the real Fredbear. I'm more of an audio disc enthusiast, but you Springlock fans are valid too. Ferdinand was originally supposed to be a one-off gag in the Objective and True FNAF timeline before I got so fond of him I brought him back for the ending of that video. So, when it came time for this remake, I wanted to give him a lot more spotlight just cause I like him a lot. His role in part 1 is basically just a slightly expanded version of his role in the entirety of the original. I won't elaborate on his greater purpose yet, but I will show the different PNGs of him that I photoshopped together. It's amazing what stock images of bears you can find on Google Images. It wasn't particularly necessary, but I remade the first image of him I used in the original timeline so he actually had Fredbear's hat instead of a poorly done hue shift of Freddy's. Then I just went forward with a bunch of different photos that might be useful whenever I need to use him. His name is also just supposed to be an overly fancy spin on Fredbear, if that wasn't clear. I just thought it was funny. If you have any further questions about this behind the scenes stuff, feel free to shoot questions in the comments and I'll probably answer them. For now though, I think I've gone about as in-depth as I can without spoiling my plans for the future parts. Part 2 will probably take longer than I initially expected, mostly because the visuals are a lot more complicated and our pace is more reasonable this time than Part 1. We're not rushing, don't worry. But do be patient, this takes time and the only work done for Part 2 before Part 1 release was general planning of how things are supposed to play out. As of now, the script is fully complete and we've gotten a decent amount of visuals done. It will be about the same length as Part 1, so there's still a lot to do. I think a November release might be the most likely, but we'll see how that goes. But hey, as a reward for watching this, here's a little teaser for Part 2.
Hey, dummy, I bet you can't help us escape.